Hey y'all, in preparation for the next wave of Novaflares whenever it's due to come out, I think it's high time I do a quick overview on our two latest ones. About 2 months ago, I sent out a survey asking people what they wanted to see in Sparkles and Black Swan's Novaflares, so I'll be going over those responses in addition to reviewing their kits to see how well those buffs delivered. Without further ado, let's begin! Starting with the one and only Miss Sparkle, the biggest requested change was to extend her crit damage buff duration, which was always just under 2 turns. This meant that it was difficult to pair her with other action advancers, and she often couldn't make good use of drastic action shifts, such as action delay on herself, or team-wide immediate turns via Robin's ult, or apocalyptic shadow breaks. Next up was either more SP or energy generation, grouped together as they fulfill pretty much the exact same thing. While Sparkle's SP economy was still great due to her technique front-loading 3 SP, as well as the ease of use that came with an increased skill point cap, her usual 3-turn ult generating 4 SP, paired with her skill spamming nature, only made her slightly SP positive, to the point where she could fall behind basic spammers like Cypher, or only just barely edge out SP neutral advancers like Sunday, whose additional turns could themselves be converted into more SP via basics. Speaking of that skill point cap limit though, using Sparkle's ult to generate those 4 SP turned out to be a bit harder in practice, since most teams would have to remain at 3 skill points or lower before their next skill point usage in order to reap the full +4 without overcapping. Certain archer teams also face this problem even with 9 SP, due to their usual playstyle of alternating between burst periods of unloading skill points and recovery periods of gaining them back. The 50% advance is also behind a lot of more modern supports, though this point was more contentious among the replies, since increasing her action advance to say 100% would essentially make her another Bronya or Sunday clone, stripping her of her unique identity of trading turns for maximum damage. And while this would work pretty well alongside the requested amp buffs too, if we were to maintain that nuke playstyle. This would also require regearing your DPS to speed boots in order to maximize Sparkle's effectiveness via a -1 setup if she did have that 100% advance forward. And well, we all know how popular the last Novaflare that required you to change main stats went. Lower build requirements was the least popular option, though I'm sure many people would appreciate not having to build 167, 168, Eagle, and DDD builds for an optimal Sparkle. It's just far from the top option on the priority list. Other one-off responses included having her lean more into specific archetype support, as well as Quantum Elation or Mammoth's Right allies. As for specific parts of Sparkle's kit to buff, the most popular option, which actually wasn't mentioned earlier, was reworking her A6 Trace, which offered a measly 15% AoE attack and up to 30% more for Quantum allies, depending on how many were on the team. Definitely a part of the old mono element traces, which really just didn't offer enough amp to justify a trace slot and felt like a waste of space, especially when we look at today's traces. Next up, as alluded to before, was that 1.99 turn crit damage duration on her skill, which somehow also took up an entire major trace just to extend, followed by her talent and ult, likely due to the damage percent they offered not feeling strong enough in today's day and age. Her A2, which makes her basic refund the same energy as her skill, saw by far the least demand for a rework among all her major traces, likely due to it having legitimate use for certain rotations. Using a basic instead of a skill gives 2 more SP after all, which is a whole archer arrow, and it also works excellently with Meshing Cogs, a free-to-play 3-star light cone that has the ability to outdo even Sunday's signature in terms of energy regen, providing 8 energy per attack or hit received versus Sunday light cone's 6 per skill. Sparkle's skill itself wasn't voted for as much, but given how her A4 is just a skill upgrade, it definitely received a lot of indirect votes. And then we have a sharp drop-off with their Eidolons and Technique, both because they're actually quite strong, but also because they're not really as relevant compared to the rest of her kit. So with all of that in mind, did they deliver? Well, yes. The most popular options by far were all implemented, with the contentious 50% advance being retained, and some welcome speed tuning relief being offered at Sparkle's E1, now giving a bonus 15% speed. Paired with the free Sparkle announcement, this was quite the welcome change for previous E0 Sparkle mains, who now had a legit vertical investment option into her, as well as the E2 Sparkle havers, who by default received this benefit as well. The E2 buff was also quite nice for them. Pretty much every aspect of her kit was improved in some way as well, including her technique, which really didn't need a Novaflare anyways. Overworld invisibility that can transfer between characters, as well as plus 3 SP at the start of battle, makes it still arguably one of the best techniques in the game. But the new plus 20 starting energy is just a cherry on top. As for the actual changes, Sparkle's A6 was reworked to give the full 45% attack benefit to everyone now, and added an extra 10% res pen to whoever received her skill's crit damage boost, a much appreciated boost to both her team-wide and single target amp. Paired with her new A4, which not only moved the extended turn duration to her base skill and extended it to 2 turns, finally, but also made her skill free if her crit damage buff targets consumed 3 SP in 1 turn following her latest skill. Sparkle now had a lot more flexibility with regards to what she could do. She could now weave in basics without losing her crit damage buff duration for more SP, or even use her skill with 0 SP left and refund it all back with her ult. I'm kinda surprised this wasn't really mentioned, since it's a pretty interesting change compared to Bronya and Sunday, who always need 1 skill point to fire off their skills. The basic energy giving A2 gained an extra line to refund 1 energy per SP usage. This means that each Sparksy skill refunds 1 energy, letting her battery sparkle with as much as 20 energy per turn and easily letting her 2-turn ult. Unfortunately, due to the exact way this was implemented, each of Archer's 2 SP arrows only refund 1 energy, as well as Dan Hung's 3 skill points basics also only refunding 1. This means that with a Sunday S1 and a 5% energy regeneration rope, Archer is 2 energy off of guaranteeing a 2-turn Sparkle ult with the max 10 arrows fired in 2 turns, and well, with Dill doing 2 attacks every 2 turns, he's a lot further off. Still, any stray hit, at least in Archer's case, will secure the 2-turn ult. And even outside of dedicated skill point DPS archetypes, that extra energy can allow for Sparkle to grab her ult just a bit faster than she normally should. Goodbye 1%. And boy are you rewarded handsomely now that every time you ult, you gain a massive 6 SP instead of 4, and you're able to store excess skill points that fill up your missing SP bar at the end of each turn. Do note that the skill point from Bronya's and Ron May's signatures are sadly not stored as part of this excess when Sparkle uses her ult. Being able to fire off her ult otherwise though, and not worry about losing SP, especially in tandem with the fact that her technique now guarantees her to turn 1 ult on just an energy regeneration rope alone, is super nice. For perspective, by the way, that means Sparkle by herself, with her guaranteed technique into skill to ult, nothing else, is plus 8 SP after turn 1. Plus 8. And you don't need to worry about wasting any of it. She holds on to all of the excess for you. If anything, you should be concerned about not burning enough of them and skilling more often on your supports, both for more energy and so that their basics don't go to waste, suffering from success. And remember that damage percent on her ult and talent that was mentioned earlier as being kinda lackluster? Yeah, it's now changed to vulnerability, which despite being a lower percentage in terms of numbers, ends up being a decent damage improvement for most teams due to their saturation on damage percent. Alongside the extra attack and res pen buffs, which is really where her total numbers start to rise, her numbers are now so high that she can even run in DOT, who ignore her crit damage buffs completely, but especially appreciate how much SP she churns out on top of her surprisingly decent team-wide amp. Finally, for you Eidolon gamers, her early Eidolons have been improved, with the E1 essentially granting Sparkle a permanent 15% speed boost, and her E2 gaining another 6% defense shred. Yeah, 24% for the whole team was already broken enough to make this a top tier Eidolon back then. The extra 6% now though, seeing especially as how defense shred scales harder the more you have of it, makes an already valuable upgrade even better. I really haven't seen an in-depth breakpoint guide to my knowledge to account for Sparkle's new speed breakpoints, so here you go, round it up to the nearest decimal. If you don't have E1, just add 15.15 speed to every breakpoint that isn't under the before E1 section. What's crazy is that in one-wave game modes like Pure Fiction and Apocalyptic Shadow, it's actually quite possible to Sparkle to get 4 turns in the 0 cycle at a relatively modest speed breakpoint with the help of Von Whack, Eagle, Dance Dance Dance, and 2 ults from herself. No other teammate assistance required. Yeah, if utilized properly, this E1 can let you do crazy things. Only get it if you're sure what you know you're going to do with it though, or if you're going to aim for E2. Now, time to address the other elephant in the room. Sure, 30% vuln, 90 crit damage, 45 attack, and 10 res pen all sounds great, but how powerful is Sparkle's suite of buffs now compared to the other big league supports? Well, to illustrate this, I've taken a situation where most of those stats are diluted, aka with Acheron, stacking 4000 attack, having 20% res pen on her ult, and also with 2 supports that grant her a total of 114% vulnerability, even more than you'd find after breaking an Apocalyptic Shadow. Well, in this scenario where Sparkle's amp should be underperforming compared to her average performance, she still easily clears every single E0S1 support, with the exception of Hyperspeed E0S1 Sunday, which very few setups want to run over his usual -1 speed variant anyways. And should you equip Sunday's S1 onto her, providing her with lots of damage percent that she now lacks, her amp is legit on the level of other E1 S1 supports. The fact that an E2 Sparkle with Sunday's Light Cone can deliver more AoE amp than an E1 S1 Tribute can deliver for just Acheron's single target is frankly quite absurd. Of course, this is not a wholesale recommendation to forsake certain crucial kit aspects like Sunday's turn doubling and energy generation, or Tribute's attack spam, but I hope this puts into perspective just how powerful new Sparkle's amp is. Just because the damage percent on Sunday's S1 doesn't work with Sparksy, for instance, since damage percent doesn't scale to elation damage, and oftentimes Sparkle will be wanting to run an energy cone, that does not mean at all that her amp suffers from it. Not at all. In conclusion, Sparkle's Novaflare earns a 5-star rating from yours truly. She offers, bar none, the best crit damage amp in the game. She generates so much SP that basically your entire team can borderline skill spam, or when paired with a skill point hungry DPS, eliminates most if not all of their downtime, both of which contribute heavily to her rise in status as a truly universal crit support. Though, despite her major overhaul, she still plays best in her pre-existing niche of SP consumption, unlike a certain someone who had to switch out most of her teammates and still wasn't all that better off for it. Rest in peace, Jingliu. Our first Harmony Novaflare did not disappoint the slightest, and I really hope that going forward, this is the kind of treatment all Novaflares get. Nothing but the best for those that need it. Now, moving on to Black Swan. By far the most requested change for her was fixing her Arcana, whether it be doing something about Arcana stacks, resetting to 1 at the end of every turn, being unnecessarily capped at 50, or just not doing enough damage to be worth it. Debuff uptime was also a major concern, with her blast skill being the only way to apply her defense down, something that isn't ideal for a DPS that wants to maximize her damage over her speed, especially one forced to build effect hit rate into her kit on top of all of that. Her ult also misses out on a turn 1 activation and a 3-turn rotation, which really sucks considering how it applies 25% vuln and retains Arcana stacks for 2 enemy turns. Overall, pre-Novaflare, Black Swan was a selfish, slow burn DPS, neither of which played towards DOT's current breakneck pseudo follow-up attack playstyle. A couple of comments discussed perhaps making her more pure fiction oriented to provide DOT with a unique niche, and also mentioned recalibrating her slow gameplay to match DOT's fast pace as well, and to give Black Swan a reason to be used over Cyrene in a DOT team. As for specific aspects of her kit, revisiting that ult, while 25% vuln on only the enemy turn when modern DOT deals the majority of its damage before the enemy even acts, plus a 2-turn Arcana stack preservation, both underwhelming effects on a 4-turn cooldown, no thank you. It's not hard to see why so many people wanted it reworked first and foremost. Arcana's difficulty to apply and maintain for damage nowadays is hardly worth the payoff either, especially when the duo of Hyslins and Cyrene exist as DOT partners for Kafka. What's more surprising though is how much space is dedicated to it. Half of the skill and all the basic is all about Arcana's generation, and 2 of her 3 major traces plus her talent are solely focused on Arcana's application and mechanics. In other words, Black Swan is Arcana, and Arcana is Black Swan, which wouldn't be a problem if Arcana was actually, well, better. Her A6 trace providing a modest damage buff to herself is nice, but could still use some work. and while Swan's E1 is pretty nice, even to this day, 25% res pen is pretty awesome, the rest of her Eidolons could definitely use a bump up. And her technique, while not the biggest deal in the world, is RNG reliant and doesn't even do that much for how much variability it has, with its uniquely decaying by half base chance system for applying Arcana. Anyways, let's see how the changes look. And yep, as expected, Arcana works a lot better now. While Black Swan's high effect hit rate requirements weren't tweaked, she already wants to stack a decent amount on a team with Kafka anyway, so keeping the requirements the same is fine. The only real change not implemented that was asked for a lot was her energy, which honestly still sucks, but given her whole kit rework, it's at least less of a loss not having her ult up at all times. To provide an overview of these changes, and please let me know if I missed anything important, I don't really play DOT to be honest. Black Swan's ult vulnerability was changed from only applying on the enemy turn to always applying, better fitting Dot's current damage profile of front-loading one-cough killing detonations on their own turns. As a bonus, her ult E6's stacking mechanic was also applied, where every Arcana applied now has a 50-50 chance to apply one more while the ult debuff is up. Except, it's even better than her ult E6 because anyone can add this extra Arcana, not just Swan herself. On top of that though, Arcana's previous bonuses of needing 3 and 7 stacks for the blast on enemy turn and defense ignore effects respectively are now just always active. It's mainly useful for newly spawned enemies though, since now Arcana's stacking mechanic makes it so that you can get 50 stacks pretty consistently on a DOT team. Stacks now drop in half at the end of every enemy turn instead of plummeting down to 1, and the Arcana cap is technically no longer at 50 stacks. Instead, however, you can stack it as high as you want, with the number resetting back down to 50 only when Arcana damage is triggered, say via Kafka follow-ups, Heislin's ults, or the start of an enemy's turn. And yes, it will deal however many stacks of damage you have on it at the time. It is not capped to 50 stacks. It is normal for DOT to now be able to maintain anywhere between 50 to 60 stacks of Arcana consistently on an enemy now, which, as you can guess, means death by 1,000 dots. Black Swan's basic and skill now also always apply 5 Arcana on base on top of her previous Arcana stacking conditions, which has been moved to her new A2. And the defense down from her skill applies automatically to all newly spawned enemies for 3 turns, and can be refreshed from using her basic and ult now too. So yeah, it is an essentially effortless 100% uptime. You can run your slow Swan again without worrying about her debuffs falling off. Looking outside of her own needs though, Black Swan has finally learned to be more of a team player, and her 72% damage buff, which used to be selfish, is now spread across the whole team for the entire battle, no strings attached. Let me remind you that Ron May gives 68% team-wide damage, so yeah, this is quite the big deal in terms of team damage, and even opens the possibility to running her outside of DOT, should you be low on other supports of course. And for her Eidolons, E2 really is the pure fiction Eidolon now, granting plus 30 Arcana on all new enemies instead of spreading 6 to adjacent enemies after killing an Arcana debuff enemy. E4 also has 20% Vuln instead of 10% FRES reduction for all enemies, and the energy regen effect per enemy turn, or kill, is no longer capped to once per ult, making it an actually viable way of fixing her ult uptime, should you have gone all in on Swan previously for some reason. This E4 is not worth it if you're just going straight from her base kit. And since Black Swan's entire old E6 is now in her base kit, but better, her new E6 raises the Arcana reset cap by 30, which is about a 1.5 times final damage multiplier if going from 50 to 60 Arcana to 80 to 90, and makes all of her attacks always apply one more Arcana. Vertical dot investors, y'all are eating great today. So you know how I alluded to Black Swan being good even outside of DOT? Let's expand on that. Right out of the gate, she's never going to be the best choice for non-dot teams due to not contributing anything but damage amp and I guess the Nihility icon if you're playing Acheron teams, something that becomes quite clear when looking at how Ron May, who does pretty much the same thing in non-break teams, is almost completely absent. Nevertheless, 25% Vuln, 72% damage, and 20.8% defense down is a lot of amp, with the latter two having perma uptime, and on their own offering anywhere between 60 to 100% more final damage, scaling down with more damage percent and up with more defense shred, so long as you aren't exceeding the 100% defense shred cap. And with that ultimate up, let's just say that at times Black Swan is capable of amping on par with E1 harmonies. Yeah, I'm starting to see why they didn't give her a more consistent ult. It still would have been nice for sure, but being able to rival E1 S1 Tribby at times as a generalist probably was not Hoyo's intention when buffing Swan. On DOT teams, the baseline damage amp is about the same, not counting Swan's personal damage, which, to be honest, is why you kind of bring her on that team anyways, since they tend to stack more defense down and vulnerability than most teams. This cancels out Swan's amp growing with more defense down and diminishing in strength with more vulnerability respectively. Speaking as someone looking from the outside in, admittedly, this Novaflare is definitely more than satisfactory. Both on paper and in gameplay showcases, it makes Black Swan actually fit into the team she was tailor-made for again, and lets her consistently reach her peak potential in said team. She also provides meaningful amp now, tying together the triple dot core so that everyone works together cohesively with their own specialized role. Heiselin's providing ammunition and auxiliary fire, Black Swan loading up the barrel, and Kafka shooting down everything in sight that dares to look in this team's general direction. That being said, her general debuffs are powerful enough that if for some reason your account is really stretched thin, or if you made some questionable pulling decisions like getting a Swan without Kafka, she can work. It's not exactly meta, but she can work. Additionally, for a sustained team, she's now the de facto best in slot for DOT, only losing to Cyrene and RMC in sustainless matchups, and no longer for every single boss. It would be nice if she was always just better straight up, but hey, freeing up the two most in-demand supports in the game is definitely a plus. Overall, a fantastic Novaflare, and in comparison to like Blade and Jingliu, easily the best DPS Novaflare to date depending on how you want to stretch the definition. Still can't believe that Dot gets 2 Novaflares before many archetypes get even 1 though. You'd think Jade was running this whole scheme given how much sudden prosperity DOT has gotten in back-to-back buffs. Now, let's see who's the most in demand for the next Novaflares. Granted, this is quite a small sample size with only around 62 respondents, so feel free to leave your suggestions in the description or comments below. Dill, Argenti, Sela, Jiaoqiu, and Topaz all received the highest votes by far, each garnering 20 or more mentions. With the rise of skill point hungry DPS between both versions of Sparkle, it's clearer than ever how much Dill has fallen behind, especially when he's beaten out by a free single target unit in an AoE game mode. In fact, he's the most voted for to get buffed with 28 mentions, not even counting the extra 2 times that one submission mentioned his name. Argenti and Sela are both pretty reliant on kills and ult cycling to get going, something not really possible in this day and age with low multipliers on their own kits versus HP inflation. That being said, most Argenti buff suggestions were towards making him work better with the Herda rather than as a solo carry, while Sela was much the opposite. Jiaoqiu and Topaz have both been thoroughly kicked out of their own niches, both due to low amp, inherent awkwardness in their kits, and power creep by newer 5-stars that straight up steal their job. Wait, no, I was talking about Cypher for Topaz as well. Wait, what do you mean there's another Moving down the list, we have Fu Xuan, Acheron, and Jing Yuan. Our Shenzhou leaders just don't have what it takes in today's meta, straight up, and need extra boosts to make them worth the while. And as for Acheron, yeah, a lot of Jiaoqiu votes were also votes for Acheron. Even with all the supports in the world, spamming ults isn't gonna do much if your number set the damage ceiling 2 whole versions ago, and you've been power crept time and time again since then. Definitely the strongest going down this list so far, but also way underperforming relative to their former popularity in Prime. Dr. Ratio is up next, along with just 4-star characters and version 1 characters as a whole. Yeah, it's kinda clear at this point that many players, myself included, feel that the state of the meta is really unbalanced and aren't just content with tossing their older characters entirely to play with newer ones. Firefly and Ron May down here are certainly quite interesting choices given their excellent meta standing today, but At least the submissions I received were pretty transparent about them not actually needing Novaflares. Favoritism for the win, I guess. Besides them though, Luocha sure could use a spruce up, especially when compared to the other free support he was often chosen over, and Himiko and Rappa certainly have lots of space to improve their kit clunkiness. Himiko, you already know, stack overcap and such, currency wars, yada yada, and Rappa, also you already know, weakness implants, energy and such. Yun Li may have been the Clara power creep, but I think it's fair to say that she's been far outdone as the best physical destruction unit, with a counter, too, by a country mile. Kazlana even has a bigger sword, too. As for honorable mentions, let's go over them rapid fire. Robin, likely for energy issues, Jade likely due to Naxa and Mini Hura displacing her as a third of support, plus her low personal DPS numbers, Boothill because of Firefly and arguably even Hunt March for those tryhard zero cyclers, Huohuo because her healing is lackluster, Hook, Lingsha because Brink sustains are an oxymoron, Lynx because why not, Bailu no cleanse, Japar his alt animation goes crazy and his boss attack and currency wars goes even crazier, would be nice to see some of that translated into the actual game. Fei Xiao, no new best in slot support since the release unless we count crazy expensive teams with E2 and above Cypher. Danheng PT, I guess, because of either favoritism again or wanting to be on Hyacine's level of comfortability. Arlen, Beta Arlen mentioned. Jingliu and Blade, this should tell you how underwhelming their Novaflares were that they were even on this list. Releasing Mono Remembrance into Cyrene with Maide did not help matters either. And Clara and Welt. Here are the rest of the ones that weren't mentioned by name and definitely deserve some special treatment in my opinion to make them more playable. Notice how they are all 4 stars. As for those not mentioned that probably don't need Novaflares yet, Pella and Ting Yun still do their job of ult spamming and providing constant action, skill points, and or energy well as having generally good amp, with little to no non-limited competition. Bronya to Aventurine all have their specific niches in certain teams, with Hunt March actually being a pretty strong break hyper carry with Dahlia letting her super break always. Aventurine's niche now is more fight specific with matchups like Hule and the Black Tide, though he could use some buffs too. And the rest are pretty much version 3 DPS and onward who are way too new to be buff candidates. I've definitely heard people asking for Fugue and Thirda buffs though, for what it's worth. Fugue could offer more toughness damage and team-wide support, and Thirda is showing signs of struggling in even pure fiction for the average player, and is just generally outclassed by DOT and Mono Remembrance in a game mode that should have been hers to dominate for eternity. Allegedly, anyways. Silverwolf and Kafka already have Novaflares, and unlike their other buffed half, there's just not many complaints regarding their reworks, and Black Swan and Sparkle were literally just discussed in this video. I see you, you anonymous Sparkle Novaflare round 2 submission. Mimetic virus breach attempts will not be tolerated. Anyway, that's all I got. Thanks for watching.